Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Machalski, Quentin Q. Crisco, and the one and only Ron Luce, bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Bears on Tap. My name is Quentin Crisco. You can find me on Twitter at BuckHisStats, and I'm joined, as always, by the man himself at Luce on Tap, Ron Luce. How are you doing today, buddy?
Q, I'm doing great, man. It's always good to get on the microphone, talk some Bears football with you, and we got some good discussion going on today. So I'm very excited to jump into things, man. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good. So we are kicking off a new series here where we are just going position group by position group on the Bears roster and trying to just taking a deep dive into what the Bears have on this roster, what areas are clear strengths, what areas they might still need a little more at, and just trying to get a full picture out there of what the Bears are working with this year. And we need a catchy name for this. Like, I was trying to think like out of hibernation, maybe, or like last year I called it like a similar concept, clawing back, but
okay.
And I wish I didn't with Caleb doing the whole claw thing. Now I'm like, man, clawing back would have been great. Now
would have been phenomenal.
Yeah, I don't want to do it again.
Fair.
So I got to think on it a little more of a catchy name for it. But we're starting today off with running backs and wide receivers, and getting into running backs first. There's some stuff that I just kind of been thinking through all day of like with Shane Waldron. So he's a Sean McVay disciple, right? He was with McVay when it was all 11 personnel, like that. Everything was out of that 11 personnel. And then he gets to Seattle and he becomes the big tight end guy, right?
Yeah.
He wants all the tight ends all the time. And I was just reading through an article about when Seattle hired him as OC. It was talking about how the 12 personnel was really a McVay adaptation in response to the scheme being figured out, right, by Vic Fangio. And like they hit that wall against the Fangio defenses, and then Bill Belichick used those Fangio concepts in the Super Bowl to beat them. The 12 personnel was their answer to get teams back into base defense and out of nickel. But it only works if you have tight ends who can beat linebackers in man-to-man. Right. And that's where Gerald Everett comes in, right? Because that's what Gerald Everett was in LA and in Seattle. He was that tight end who could do that, who was a clear winner against linebackers in coverage. Now, I'm not 100% sure that Cole Kmet beats linebackers in coverage in man-to-man. I think he can win the catch point and get some separation, but I'm not sure he's a man beater against really any coverage player out there unless it's a thumper linebacker or something like that. But another thing that really stands out to me is how much he leaned into 13 personnel in Seattle. And that's one that's really interesting for the Bears, right? Because they only have 2 tight ends on the roster. And we're not talking tight ends today, so we won't get too much into that because this is all coming back to the run game. Full circle. I'm catching myself ranting a little here. But
you're good.
That 13 personnel, a lot of times in the league, that's associated with duo run concepts, which this is where it circles back to the running backs. We didn't really see a ton of duo on tape in Seattle, despite the 13 personnel. We saw a lot of inside zone, and sometimes it's, dang near impossible to tell the difference between duo and inside zone, like it just depending on circumstances. But we didn't see a ton of duo, but I'm not really sure how much of that has to do with what Shane Waldron wants to do versus what Shane Waldron needed to do. And that's really where I'm hitting this really odd point with Shane Waldron trying to figure out his run scheme. It's like last year it was so boring, right? And it was just like inside zone and a lot of inside zone, not even the outside zone route of the McVay system. But then you look at the O-line they're working with last year. They had injuries all over the line all year. And what's the most basic run concept you can throw out there when you're dealing with multiple rookies and guys who haven't played together.
Inside zone, baby.
Right. Everyone knows inside zone. It's, that's what you're raised on. So I went back and watched Shane Waldron's first game from 2023, right? Because in my mind, what an offensive coordinator puts on tape in the scripted drives of their first game of the season. That is what that offensive coordinator sees his offense being. That is exactly it. Because there's no injuries yet. There's you're probably overreaching most offensive coordinators about what you think your players can execute, but it's what you want to be doing all year long. And then, you'll go back to the whiteboard, you'll cut some stuff down, you'll make it easier on your guys, or you'll adjust for injuries. In Seattle's case, a lot of inside zone came in. But you look at that first game and those first few drives, man, they're running GT counter, G lead. They had some split zone in there. It was a really diverse run scheme. Wasn't being executed exactly the way you wanted it to be, but he wanted to get out there with more of his runs, which makes me think this Waldron run offense is probably going to be more multiple than people are realizing, people are talking about. Last year, we look at Luke Getsy. He ran a very multiple run scheme.
Yeah.
There was all sorts of gap concepts littered in there with the outside zone, not as much inside zone, but there was a lot of different concepts that the Bears O-line, 4 out of the 5 starters, are well-versed in already.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you even look at Ryan Bates or Coleman Shelton. They both came from offenses that did quite a bit of different stuff with the run game. It wasn't as simple as this is just what we do, and we're hammering inside zone all day. Right. Even outside zone, like older McVay scheme might have been before he started sprinkling more gap concepts in there. And so that's where we really get to the running backs of how is this running back room coming together? And we got a graphic here. We'll go ahead and pull up. And I'm sorry for owning the whole show, Ron, to this point. I've been thinking through this all day, and I was just like, I have a lot to say right now.
I thoroughly enjoy listening to you get all nerdy and talk football. I enjoy it because you just brought up so many good points. Just one quick little nugget to add on there too with Waldron, right? Like you get that idea of these OCs and what they want to do early in the season and what they envision the offense being. And then largely as the season goes on, it is a very much an adaptation to what your talent is on your team with injuries, with just the natural, maybe guys having a rough season, right? Like we've seen it time and time again. Not every player is linear in the sense of getting better, right? Guys are going to have down years. Guys are going to have off seasons. Then it becomes that's where the real work takes place, right? Like you can have your beautiful magical unicorn theory of what you want the offense to be right away, but when things go awry and things go wrong, that's when the real adjustments need to be made. And you mentioned it, right? They had to use a lot of 13 personnel, mostly because of an inadequate offensive line due to injury, probably more so than actually that being what was the ideal situation for Waldron, what he actually wanted to do. So I think it's a great prelude to, though, again, just laying out for everybody listening along, whether it's with us live or you're listening to this on podcast form, what our topic of discussion is going to be, especially with these running backs now moving forward and what this Bears offensive line brings to what Shane Waldron can do from a conceptual standpoint.
Well, and on the 13 personnel point, it gets really interesting because it's like you look at that team when Waldron first got there. They didn't have they drafted Dwayne Eskridge in the second round to be their number 3 receiver. He never really panned out. And I start to wonder even more how much the heavy tight end usage was more out of necessity than anything because they had two wide receivers that they trusted and no one really behind them. And they drafted JSN last year. I didn't go find this information. I'd be interested to find it, though. From the second half of last year, I wonder what Seattle's 11 personnel usage rate looks like because that's when JSN started to come on and they started feeling more comfortable keeping him in packages. And I almost wonder if that was more traditional to what you saw from the Rams.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's a good little bookmark of something that we'll have to take away, especially kind of rolling into the season moving forward.
Yeah, well, once we get to tight end day and wide receiver day,
of course,
because it's running back day. And so we're looking at the Bears running back roster here. We see DeAndre Swift, who we know got the big contract. We see Khalil Herbert, and then behind him, Roschon Johnson and Travis Homer. What do you think of this group? What are your initial thoughts here, Ron?
I think when I look at this group, I look at a group and I say there's something there, but I don't entirely know what it is. And I know that's a very blanketed general statement, but what I mean by that is Khalil Herbert is a player that 2 seasons ago, I think really had a breakout in a sense. He thrived playing behind David Montgomery. He looked great when Monty was hurt for a few games in 2022. And hell, as a number 2 running back, nearly had 1,000 yards rushing on the ground. I believe he fell like just short of 900 yards for the season. And then he had a little bit of an off year last year. I think a lot of that more so attributed to injuries. It really didn't look like he had his burst back until late in the season. I think back to that Christmas Eve game. That's really the first time that we saw that explosiveness of Herbert in the run game. But then I look at a guy like DeAndre Swift, who's had a very interesting career, right? You contribute to, maybe you could toss some of that up to just being misused in his time in Detroit. Ultimately, obviously, being shipped out in favor of, ironically, David Montgomery. And then having the season that he did a year ago with the Eagles and what that looked like and such a productive season and him really taking that starting running back job and running with it in Philadelphia. He's a guy that was a high draft pick. We all know the talent that is DeAndre Swift, right? We saw what he could do at Georgia. We knew what he was coming out. This is a group that is talented, especially on paper. I'm really interested to see, though, how it all meshes because of really, just in fairness, the very different types of running backs that I think they have sprinkled throughout the whole room in its entirety.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and I think it's really interesting. I mean, I tend to think it's more of a 2-back rotation than anything between Swift 100%. And Herbert, but history says one or maybe both of those guys are going to miss time at some point. I mean, Herbert, we all know has missed some time almost every year of his career, I believe. And then Swift, I have in his notes here, he's played 13 games each of the last 4 years, but he's missed 1 to 3 games in each of those years. Like, right. I think only last year was 1 game, but the 3 years before it was 3 or 4 games each year. So you are going to see Roschon get some chances within there. Maybe even you see Travis Homer get some chances in there, especially with his familiarity in the offense. But really, I mean, so as I'm looking into DeAndre Swift's background, it's like he can if you're running some of the more spread concepts that Waldron likes to get into on 3rd down, because the heavy personnel, that's early downs that he really likes. Right. But he likes to spread it out on 3rd down, especially like 3rd and short. I notice he likes to really get his receivers out in splits and just spread the field wide to make it tougher on the defense. Something I actually really like that I saw on tape from him. But in Swift, you have a guy who you can probably line up out wide at times, maybe motion him back into the backfield. You can create some create some light boxes in there for him to work with, even if it is inside zone stuff where it's like he might be able to hit some shots on that with his shiftiness and his ability to make people miss. Like you look at each of the last 2 years, he's above average in the missed tackles forced and above average in the explosive runs of 15 plus yards every year in his career, 10 plus yards 3 of the last 4 years. He's a guy who has been able to generate these explosive runs. I'm not sure he has the breakaway speed to really be the guy who's hitting 60-yard touchdowns.
Right.
But he does have the shiftness to create 10, 15, 20-yard runs that are very valuable to any offense.
100%. And I think you could almost sit there and make the same argument, though, for a guy like Khalil Herbert, because he is kind of that home run threat, right? And I think that's where, you have it noted in here as a part of the notes here in the graphic. For those that are listening in a podcast form, I'll read it. But you said, Herbert probably fits the outside scheme more clearly, should work fine for inside concepts, limited role on passing downs because of the underwhelming route running, hands, and blocking. I think it's that perceived weakness that could be really interesting to see how Shane Waldron exploits this year. Just for the exact same reason you said, right? There might be a play earlier in the game where DeAndre Swift's maybe out wide. He comes in on a motion. Maybe it's play action, right? Maybe there's, they're hitting a backside slant or something like that for, 4 or 5 yards on third down. Later in the game, if you were to take Khalil Herbert in that same situation, maybe you create that lighter box because of, the last time we saw a running back come in and motion in on third and short, they're throwing the screen or the slant to the backside.
Right.
Well, now maybe that is where you get those light boxes. And with a home run hitter like Khalil Herbert, maybe you can take some of those shots in the inside zone game and really try to get those big chunk plays on third down in the run game. And then again, it continually sets up new elements of that playbook moving forward. So I think that's a fascinating thought with a guy like DeAndre Swift, who did a lot of it, I think, last year with the Eagles. You saw him have those type of runs, especially out of the gun in the inside zone. I think, with Herbert's speed, I think especially if they set it up right with some of these light boxes because of spreading it out on third down, which I agree. I also like that about Waldron. I'm a big fan of creating more space for your athletes on short yardage situations. I think it's an okay thing to do. I think there's the right situation for the tush push and the old, fullback dive, but there's also a situation to be had where, you can run a little bit of that inside zone on third and short. I'm really interested to see how Waldron uses these guys to set some of that stuff up, because if he wants to get creative, I think he's got 2 running backs that truthfully can help him do that in this scheme coming into the year.
Yeah, and I think to the Seattle roster, and it's like Kenneth Walker, right? He's more like Khalil Herbert, and Kenneth Walker's a monster. Like I don't think Herbert is the same tier of player, but they're similar in the way that they play and in their explosiveness and their threat. Like I think Walker can be a bit more every down than you want with Herbert, or than you get with Herbert, but I think there is similarity there in the way that they can really make you pay in an instant. And DeAndre Swift is almost more like Zach Charbonnet, who had a more limited role there last year, but he's more of a do-it-all guy, really shifty, really good in space, and can be a threat in those passing downs in a number of roles. And I don't think it came fully to light last year in Seattle because Charbonnet was a rookie, but I think that a pretty even split by the end of the year was what you were seeing. And I'm interested to go back and look at whether they brought any gap concepts back for Kenneth Walker, because that's where I think Khalil Herbert can really gash you. Like, I think he's a strong outside zone runner. I think he can gash you in outside zone. But with his burst and explosiveness, I just can't help but think, like, man, if we can pop a hole open with G lead or GT counter, like, he can run for days,
Yeah, 100%. And I also like to, because it feels like for the first time in maybe at least a few years, there's a lot of different elements in terms of players in this backfield, in terms of what they can do with each of these guys. Almost, dare I say, it's a little reminiscent of what like the Eagles have done over the last few years, the Chiefs have done over the last few years, where they might have 3 running backs in that room that will get touches because they all bring a little something different to the table. And I think in that way with Roschon Johnson too, as well, right? Like he's a player, he's a little more, to the grindstone. He's going to run you over. He's physical, but he does have some of that passing element in his game where he can be a decent receiver. He can be a solid, an okay blocker, at least in terms of the passing game, especially on quick plays, right? If he's got to meet a blitzing linebacker in the hole or something like that. So I'm intrigued to see how the diversity of skill sets are used truly by Waldron, because as much as I think we're going to see a lot of DeAndre Swift, he's going to absolutely be the lead back. I think Waldron's going to want to get creative in some ways, especially more so maybe with Herbert than Johnson. I'm just trying to give him those opportunities to, again, hit those home runs. He might only get 10 to 12 touches a game, but if he can use those 10 to 12 touches, 10 might even be generous, but if he gets those 10 touches per game and he hits on 1 or 2 of them, for 15, 20 yards, I mean, those are things that can just transform a drive by, that one play sets up another. And I think with how Waldron has done things in the past, with his understanding of offenses coming from the McVay tree, I'm really excited to see what the creativity is, because again, I also think the Bears have a better offensive line than Seattle did last year because of all the injuries. And I think their depth might be a little better than Seattle's was last year now as well, with the additions of guys like Shelton and so forth, where they can probably institute a lot more of those, and they're not going to have to, hey, we got to do this because this is just the situation we're dealt, versus, hey, we can get creative because we have a little more talent up front to let these running backs fully utilize their skill sets in the game plan.
Yeah, and I almost, to your Roschon point, I almost think Roschon's role here is going to be more of, like, I know he can be a threat in the passing concepts, but I hate to take passing snaps away from guys who are shiftier and faster and can be more of a pain in the butt for defenses in space. And that's where I end up with that, of like, you look at Waldron, he loves to run the football in passing situations and pass the football in running situations, and that's where you're in a passing situation, you're going to be against a lighter box with more spread out concepts and more space. I think where Roschon could really carve out a role is in that 12, 13 personnel in run looks when they are running. When you need a bit more smash mouth of a style, because I don't think Swift or Herbert really gives you that smash mouth style.
Yeah, you get that guy that can come in on, hey, it's 3rd and 3 and we're on we're inside the 5. They know we're going to come in with 13 personnel and run the football. You want that Johnson size and that kind of the pound the rock element that he brings in his game to just get the 3 yards, and either let's get in the end zone or let's get enough for, if it's a first down inside the 5 and give this thing another shot at it. So I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense. And quite frankly, I think especially with his injuries last year and him missing as much time as he did, I don't think having, a lesser of a role, but a more unique role because of that additional piece of his game that the other two don't have, I think that could be good for Roschon Johnson in year 2, especially coming back after a really rough rookie year due to all the injuries.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, for a 4th or 5th round pick, I think he was 4th round.
4th rounder, yep.
If you can contribute on offense and be a core special teamer, that's W as a draft pick. Yeah. And that's what he is exactly. He contributes in every aspect of special teams, and if you can be the Bears Adrian Peterson, not the Vikings Adrian Peterson, the Bears Adrian Peterson, that's a quality 4th round pick, and that's what we hope Roschon ends up being for a long time here. Now, one thing that is worth noting, and it's, Seattle's always been Pete Carroll. It's a run-heavy offense, and, they run the ball a lot, but not really. Seattle's last year 31st in rush attempts. Year before, they were 22nd in rush attempts in the league. I almost get the idea that Shane Waldron likes the illusion of running the football and how that aids his passing offense more than actually being committed to running the football, and not in a bad way. So it's old school, like, yeah, commit to running the football. Like, I think more so in if he gets the defense where he wants him to throw the football, he's not afraid to throw it out of any personnel package.
Yeah, and I think on top of that too, though, when you are getting a fairly effective run game out of the limited amount of running that they're doing. I mean, they were 31st in actual running attempts, but they were 16th in efficiency in terms of, yards per attempt. If you're getting that kind of efficiency, being one of the bottom 5 teams in attempts per game, that's pretty good efficiency. And again, you play on that illusion, right, Q? Like you've said, that illusion of running the football. When you are in the middle of the pack for barely running the football in terms of yards per rush, that gives that illusion that you're running the football more than you actually are. And it forces teams to have to respect that element of the offense, even if you're not doing a lot.
Especially for how much they live in shotgun. I mean, that Seattle offense played a lot of shotgun, a lot of pistol, which is an interesting element to add into any running offense, which I wish the Bears would have done more last year. Like, it's the ways that you can create play action out of pistol make stuff really interesting. And I think that's something we're going to see a good amount here in Chicago with Waldron calling plays.
I think on top of it too, when you have a quarterback and I know this isn't the quarterback show, so I'll keep it short, but you compare Geno Smith's movement ability to that of a Caleb Williams, or like you had mentioned, right, for last year of a Justin Fields. I would put Williams and Fields as better athletes than Geno Smith in terms of physically using his legs. The beauty of pistol, you can get uber creative out of pistol. Like you said, not only from a play action standpoint, but we've seen the option game make its way to the NFL. It's become a part of the NFL, not nearly to the same level as it is in college, obviously, but it is still, there are wrinkles of the RPO game that have been added into that now. There is so much you can do out of pistol because you can run pistol with an up back as well and almost create like a triple option effect of you've got the inside read and you got that D end and he flies down and commits, your quarterback can take off and you have a pitch man. Mm-hmm. Right? Like there's little cute wrinkles that you can do. And it's not so much because like, oh, it's going to work every single time and it's going to be super efficient. You force the defense to have to respect those little wrinkles of what you can do on the field. And the more diverse you can get in terms of personnel packages, decision-making, and things like that, you just keep your opponent naturally on their toes a lot more than you do when they know what you're doing because of any type of limitations, whether it's just the roster at hand, whether it's what the offensive coordinator likes to do. I'm excited to see that wrinkle. I think pistol's just severely underappreciated. And I think for a guy like Williams, where you can have the play action element off of it with maybe a screen to a guy who loves to get the ball behind the line of scrimmage and DJ Moore, a little precursor to what we'll be talking about here in a little bit. I think that's an extremely important element that you can add to the playbook because now you are giving that RPO option for a guy like Caleb Williams, where again, you force that one guy to have to think about something different. And that's when you can open up some of these runs for some of these, running backs as well, guys like Khalil Herbert or DeAndre Swift.
And also not to get too nerdy about play action, because I know I've nerded out about play action a few times on here. But I think there's also an element of, we hear all the time about the limitations of under center play action because defenses can rotate while the quarterback's back is turned and they have one more thing to diagnose, right? But one thing that I think that overlooks a little bit is the defense also can overcommit when they see the quarterback turn. So it's almost like the quarterback is giving something up. So if they were still looking to pass, you could almost process of elimination for the safeties, right? They're like, okay, well, if it's play action, it's going over here, over there. But pistol kind of changes that when your back's turned because you have less wasted time, less wasted steps of the quarterback is blind. Because rather than saying, okay, I'm taking a turnaround, I'm taking my 3 steps, faking the handoff, and taking 3 steps the other way, and then finding my guy downfield, it's your just spin around, basically, and your eyes are right back on the defense. And I think that it makes it harder to rotate late because it's so much faster of a motion. It makes it easier for the quarterback to catch the start and the end of the rotation potentially. And also I think it puts the defenders to some point at ease a little bit. Maybe it's the linebackers, maybe it's the safeties of he's turning around. They would just run in shotgun if they wanted to pass, or this play would just be shotgun. Like, I think pistol it's something that hasn't been entirely explored. We started to see it in the NFL the last year or two. And like a friend of mine on Twitter, Brandon Robinson, he's been mentioning it for the last year or so. He actually mentioned in our podcast last year that he thinks pistol, you're going to start seeing an explosion of it in the NFL the next few years. And I tend to agree with him the more I look into it.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good point. Like it's a wrinkle that the casual fan doesn't think about, right? Because defense is such a reactionary philosophy, really. I mean, defense is very different than offense. And this was something that I always told people because I played both offense and defensive line in my playing career, most notably in high school. And I always got to ask, which side of the ball do you like better? And it's like, I like offense better than defense. And the reason for that is defense is all reactionary. You are playing body cues. You are playing, just raw instinct effectively coming off the football. Whereas offense, it's more calculated. You know what you're doing. You're trying to set things up. And it's a little bit easier in a lot of senses, in my opinion, to do offense because you have the upper hand of knowing what the decision is. With play action, you're 100% right. If you think about it, even a play action out of a gun, the ball is still visible. Play action out of, just traditional under center.
That's what, thank you. This is what I was looking for. I couldn't find it in my head of like, wait, the quarterback turns out. I couldn't completely find it. I think I still made good sense of it, but I was like, I'm missing something here.
Yeah, that's the only time. And when you're under center, naturally, you're more likely to run the football. I think what pistol does for especially an offensive coordinator like Waldron, who likes to run out of the shotgun, is what pistol does is it just brings in the elements of under center that are advantageous to offense, in my opinion. You have the ability for the quarterback to turn his back. But once he's coming back, it's not that old traditional, he needs to get back and get quick because he's got to create space for himself coming from the line of scrimmage. You already have that natural space. It's less of a turn. It's a quicker comeback. You might get a half a second back. And in the world of the NFL, that half a second makes a world of difference when it comes to making throws down the field. So again, I think there's so many wrinkles of it that there's going to be a new evolution on offense in the NFL. It happens time and time again. I wouldn't be surprised if the pistol starts to come back in, and especially if coaches start to get creative with it, because I can just off the top of my head right now think of 6 or 7 different concepts that you can create out of pistol, whether it's option plays, if you want to get, kind of cute and get some RPO involved. But then as well, you just create different looks because you can have an up back who just quick, gets to the free end faster or things like that. You can have a little bit more of that, under center without the uncomfortability of your quarterback having to rush decisions because he needs to be able to create space for himself in the pocket.
You can create bootlegs out of shotgun, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean,
exactly.
That's a huge part. Like in shotgun, you're almost automatically saying we're inside zone or we're outside zone. Maybe we might be duo. Maybe we might have a gap RPO here or there.
Yeah,
but
maybe there's a trap coming or something on a quick hitter inside. But even then, like you said, it is. I think it's a sorely underappreciated formation in the world of the NFL, and I think we saw the big boom of it in college back in like the late 2000s. I think back to like the Juice Williams, Illinois teams, like that era to me was kind of the height of the pistol. And I wouldn't be surprised now, especially with how innovative these coaches have become in 2024, if some of these older concepts like the pistol make a return with some of the new day wrinkles into them that we've seen and have become staples in virtually every NFL playbook.
I mean, with Shane Waldron, we're going to get the wing T, we're going to get the T formation. I mean, we're going to see.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Bring it.
Seriously, I was watching some Seahawks today, and it was like, oh, well, that's a T formation right there. Okay.
It's like, ooh, I haven't. Well, at least he'll be on brand, At least he's, bringing back the old T formation.
And for anyone sitting there who might not know what the pistol is, so it's essentially the quarterback. It's like a bit more shallow of a shotgun. So rather than being under center or in shotgun, he's like a step or two forward from being in shotgun.
Yeah.
And the running back, rather than being next to him like he would be in shotgun, he's a few hash marks behind him. So you can create that vertical movement on a handoff or on a play fake.
I would say for people that are trying to figure out what it would look like, take a shotgun formation, have the running back slide over to where the quarterback would be, and have the quarterback take 2 big steps forward. Yeah. It's a short snap shotgun effectively is what the pistol is, hence the smaller gun. It's a pistol, not a
shotgun versus a pistol. There you go. Where's the K gun fit in all that?
I have no idea. That's a great question.
Some Jim Kelly. All right. Let's move on to the wide receiver room. And this one's fun. We got 2 slides here. This first one, we're showing the whole roster. And if you're listening, not viewing, we encourage you to go to YouTube, check it out. We got some great graphics up here, but if not, we're going to explain them to you the best that we can. So next slide after this, we'll get it more into the nitty gritty of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. But looking at this group, Ron, with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, you got Odunze, obviously, who's not on the graphic because he has no NFL stats yet. Right. Tyler Scott, Velus Jones, and a few other names here. What are your initial thoughts?
When you look at it like this without Rome Odunze in it, it's a lot more underwhelming, truthfully. It's very top heavy. And you can make that argument still, though, even with Rome Odunze. Yes, there's a lot of hype around him, but he still needs to pan out and become a quality NFL player to truly make what looks like, look so good on paper, execute, look good on the field as well. So when you do kind of boil this down and keep, I almost kind of like this graphic because it keeps the unknown of Rome Odunze kind of involved. It's very top heavy, but it's a very good top heavy, right? You've arguably two of the best receivers in the NFL in recent years, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And yes, there's a lot of inexperience otherwise. Velus Jones Jr. kind of became a gadget player largely at points last year. You saw him a little bit in the run game. I'm actually kind of interested to see if he takes on that role with Waldron as well. Dare I say, like, Velus Jones kind of reminds me of a poor man's Cordero Patterson in a lot of ways.
I think that's very fair. Cordero Patterson with fumbling issues.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then Tyler Scott is just, unfortunately for him, is just kind of a small receiver. And I think he really never found his footing last year. And again, a lot of that was attributed to, it was really a two-man show with Cole Kmet and with DJ Moore. So, top heavy, but high quality top heavy. And there is a lot of things that need to be considered. Obviously, when you look at the receiving room, it's not necessarily a depiction of all pass catchers, right? We talked about DeAndre Swift already. We've talked about Roschon Johnson a little bit. On a future episode, we'll talk about Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett and what that adds to it. But also with Rome Odunze, again, he is still largely an unknown. So of your NFL talent, it's very top heavy. It's very underwhelming at the bottom. I would almost make the argument, Q, and like Dante Pettis to me is like the third best receiver on this list with Odunze not being there. And I'm not even trying to say that to be mean. He's the most polished, I guess, in terms of NFL experience and NFL success of the names here, right? And Simba Webster really hasn't seen a lot of tick unless it's been in the return game. Colin Johnson, not a lot to be seen there. And obviously Scott and Jones are very similar. So top heavy, but I think a lot of promise as well, though, within the passing game and what it means for Caleb Williams in the future.
Yeah, and I will say I think I would take Tyler Scott over Dante Pettis at this point in Pettis's career after, not really playing at all last year. He was on some roster at some point, I'm sure, but he didn't qualify enough to get stats in this graphic. One thing that's interesting with Tyler Scott to me is he actually started to show a little bit of something with Tyson Bagent in at quarterback, right? It wasn't a ton, but he showed something. It was a 5-game stretch. He had 6 catches for 57 yards, so nothing that you're blown away with. Or actually, I guess it was 4 games. It's depending on how much you want to count the Minnesota game where Fields got hurt. But so in those 4 games, 4 catches for 25 yards. Not great, but that's 4 rushes for 25 yards. 4 catches for 45 yards. So a total of 70 yards on 8 touches. Not great efficiency, but it's something for a rookie wide receiver who really hadn't played any snaps before that. I do think you can get the idea in your head, for me at least, that maybe Tyler Scott can be a wide receiver 4 in this league, right? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. If you're saying you're expecting him to be your wide receiver 3, I'm worried. If you're saying maybe he can be your wide receiver 4, I feel good about it. I think there's enough there that I can say that's okay. Yeah, you're on mute, bud.
Son of a bitch. I knew that was going to happen at some point. I think
they got to install something on like these streams where it's just like I click a button and it flashes on your screen. You're on mute, so I don't have to say it.
Just big flashing yellow letters. No, but speaking of flash, I think that's the element that Tyler Scott needs to find in the league is that big playability downfield. Mm-hmm. Because I think if he gives you that element as a 4th receiver, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Q. I think that's the perfect case scenario for a guy that was a 5th-round draft pick and is a little on the smaller side and is relatively known as a speedster, right? If you can be that guy that helps open up the field, besides for just DJ Moore, who is largely right now your deep threat per se, that adds so many more wrinkles and elements too, especially when you get, all 4 of those guys involved potentially on a play. Tyler Scott being against your, 4th or 5th corner, on, any given moment on, let's say, an all go or something like that, that could pan out really well as an extra weapon. So I agree with you. I think a lot of it for Scott too was it wasn't the greatest situation year one. He was very clearly, the third, fourth receiver on the roster for a large majority of the year. He had a little bit of, he wasn't really on the field a ton. And again, let's be honest, outside of Cole Kmet and DJ Moore, that was the passing offense, right? That was just what what Justin Fields would like to go to and what they did. So I think it's largely unfair to criticize Scott for his rookie year right now because there just wasn't a lot of opportunity for development. But again, if he is going to develop, I agree with you. I think development in terms of could he be a fourth receiver on this team? He looks really good if he's your number 4, Velus is your number 5, / Dante Pettis is your number 5, versus, like you said, with him needing to be your number 3.
Now, so looking at thinking about Shane Waldron's offense and how wide receivers fit into it, how do you see the roles kind of playing out here between the top 3 guys like DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze? Like if we were going to say which one is going to be DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, how do you see that shaking out?
I think for this year, so it's tough, right? Because you're talking about 2 very different receiver rooms in terms of what they do. Right, you look at that Seattle room, you see Tyler Lockett, who has thrived over his career as a great possession receiver, right? Like, obviously, he's got all the elements of he's fast, he can be a deep threat, but like, he's a guy that if you need a big catch in a big moment, like Tyler Lockett has largely been that guy ever since Doug Baldwin moved on effectively. DK Metcalf, he's your big, strong unit of a human being. He's your go up and get it guy. He's your big play weapon is really what I see DK Metcalf out there in Seattle as. And then I think JSN right now, eventually I think he becomes your new Tyler Lockett once Lockett retires. But I think for JSN, he very much kind of fits in as that he's the slot guy. And his job is to be a good possession receiver over the middle of the field. Now, looking at this Bears room, I would make the argument that DJ Moore is more of your JSN, but a much better JSN, right? He does a lot more. He can do a lot more, but maybe he is the guy that they move inside a little more because of his size. I think Keenan is your Tyler Lockett, at least for this season, because of what he brings to the table, right? He's thrives in the middle of the field. He's not the big, deep threat necessarily. He's not your throw the receiver screen to him guy. That's what DJ Moore's for. But he's just reliable. And I think it's that reliability that makes me look at him as like a Tyler Lockett in this offense as that safety blanket for Caleb Williams in year one. And then I think Rome Odunze truly, at least for this season, is your DK Metcalf. I think he's your big play threat. He's going to be probably getting, third corners in most situations. He's a guy that in college thrived in the jump ball situation, right? Like he kind of does in a lot of ways remind me of a Metcalf. I think just as a better route runner than DK Metcalf was coming out of college. So I'd make the argument that this Bears receiver room is more talented than the one in Seattle, not by a ton, but at least a little bit. And I think all of them can give you so many different things. And I think all of them give you something that each of those receivers in Seattle didn't have either, right? They didn't really have a DJ Moore type player who, in a lot of ways, if you think about it, right, he's a receiver with running back tendencies after he catches the football. And then you have 2 big guys that can go up and get it in Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze versus just the one in DK Metcalf. So I'm intrigued to see how those roles play out. But that's kind of how I see them right now is like, Keenan's my Lockett, DK's my Rome, and then JSN is my DJ Moore.
I think that's fair. And I truthfully, I'm kind of sitting in a spot where I'm thinking, I think Keenan Allen might be more the JSN as far as the way the usage shook out down the stretch last year, because I don't think I want to waste Keenan Allen's legs in 12 and 13 personnel like that. That's where I'm sitting of like, I'm not sure that I want him out there in blocking situations as a 34-year-old receiver, something like that.
32. I think he's
32. But I almost think you can use portions of games to keep his legs fresh because 100%. You have this kid who is a good blocker for a receiver in Rome Odunze and who will be a real threat out there in heavy personnel because he gives you more threatening speed out there against the heavier packages. Now, counter to that, and as a baseball fan, Ron, I think you're going to love this.
I'm here for it.
Imagine the Bears are spending all of a first half, just heavy personnel, 12, 13 personnel, pounding the rock, not really giving the team a lot of reason to go into nickel, though, because they're doing enough. They're doing enough to succeed, but not enough for the opposing defense to be saying, we got to fix something here. We got to get in nickel. We got to get our lighter guys out there to fix what's going wrong. Then the Bears come out of halftime, 11 personnel. The nickel has barely played all game, and you got Odunze or DJ Moore in the slot just burning them because he has barely played. That is going from a Tim Wakefield knuckleball to a Bobby Jenks fastball. Like, that just got me hyped thinking about it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think, again, like, this is something that we as Bears fans have never seen before, where they've had this situation in that receiving room. There's been good receiving rooms, don't get me wrong, right? We've seen the likes of Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall together on the football field. We've seen the likes of, a good Allen Robinson with a still very productive Taylor Gabriel, in that 2018 season. But you've never really had it where you could make the argument there's three true alphas in that locker room. That would be incredible as something the Bears can do, because like you said, if the Bears really want to, I think they have the offensive line this year where they can be a little more of that, like, hey, we'll dink and dunk you with our tight ends because we have two great tight ends that can catch the football. And then you turn it into a track meet in the second half when, homeboy nickel corner and dime corners haven't been used all game. Now all of a sudden those guys have to go run, 50, 60-yard dashes with DJ Moore and with Odunze down the field. It's such a unique wrinkle to consider of what they can do coming into the season.
Just the idea that they can have a guy on the sideline who hasn't played in 40 minutes, hasn't run in 40 minutes, having to go out there and just start defending someone like on a go route. Like that's the type of stuff that you get excited about.
That's going to be hilarious.
Let's take a closer look here at DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And I'm Moore. I mean, I read through, if you haven't looked at them yet, Jonathan Wood of the Bears blog did some outstanding articles about
friend of the program
about how DJ Moore and Keenan Allen complement each other from a statistical standpoint over at the Bears blog, and very good work. And it was really interesting because really my takeaway from it is Keenan Allen the last, probably 5 years with the Chargers, right? He's had a target per route run over 23%. League average is 18%. Like, he's one of the most targeted receivers in the NFL. And I don't think that's going to stay the case, because I think DJ Moore is going to be your number one target all year long still, because he really can win anywhere. He's your 3-level winner. He can win, or 4-level even. He can win behind the line of scrimmage, in the short game, in the intermediate portion of the field, and the deep portion of the field. There's no place that you're saying as long as we keep DJ Moore over here, we'll be fine. Whereas with Keenan Allen, I think it's much more, you're talking about the short portion of the field. He is very specific at this point in his career. He's very good in that area. Like, it's truthfully incredible. This guy's contested target percentage is 14% when he is just owning a certain portion of the field and he's not fast anymore. I mean, he's just beating guys with his route running chops. League average is 20%. He's at 14%, 13% the year before that. Like, he is such a clean, impressive route runner for the short routes that it's perfect to say, or earlier you said, as the safety blanket, the chain mover. I think it's exactly what you have in Keenan Allen. And that's kind of why I think he's going to be more of the 11 personnel, third down, maybe second down guy out there who might be taking first downs off to keep his legs fresh.
Yeah, and I think because of Odunze being in the equation, right? Like, let's just say the Bears went Byron Murphy at the 9th pick in the draft instead of going Odunze. I think there's less wiggle room to say, hey, Keenan, you can take first down off. But now, like you said, Keenan can be a specialized player at this point in his career because he does it so well. And he's going to be that guy that when Caleb Williams needs to make a big throw in a big situation, he can look to and get in that middle of the field. Whereas, like you said, right, Odunze can be that guy that can win deep. He can win wherever, great against contested catch, great contested catch player, pardon me. And then you have DJ Moore, who wins at every level of the field. So I agree with you. I firmly felt that way too even when the trade was made, that DJ Moore is still going to be the guy. I think as the season goes on, I think there's a world where you can see Odunze kind of take over as that number 2 per se. But again, Keenan, because of the route running, even if he does lose a step, he's going to be such an effective football player and just give them, because even if he is in the field in 11 personnel, you still have to respect whoever it is that's out there at tight end. You still have to respect whoever it is coming out of the backfield, because more likely than not, it's probably going to be DeAndre Swift, who's a good pass catcher. Keenan's going to get one-on-one opportunities to just cook guys on routes and get open for first downs. And first downs to touchdowns, as my OC at St. Xavier would always say. You get first downs, you get touchdowns, you're going to win a lot of football games in Chicago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just pulled up this stat because I was curious and I didn't have it in my notes here. That last year, Keenan Allen was almost 70% in the slot for the Chargers. So, and as I'm thinking it through, even like if I'm in 12 personnel and I'm heavy, but I want my pass threats out there who can really make them pay for going heavy, I'm not sure Keenan Allen is that guy. I think Odunze and DJ Moore are those guys because they're your vertical ball winners downfield, or not necessarily ball winner. Like Odunze can be a ball winner, but more they're your vertical separators, ball winners, whatever you want to look at it as. They're the guys who can win deep and really make defenses pay for matching heavy with heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's so cool to look at this receiving room and see 3 different types of players, because I think the one thing that, Rome Odunze, just in comparison to DJ Moore, are 2 very different receivers. And that's good. Like they both bring different things to the table that are going to help this offense, going to help Caleb Williams, going to help Shane Waldron. But having Keenan there let's be honest, like DJ Moore is a good route runner. He's not Keenan Allen in terms of route running.
Right.
Rome Odunze is not Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, if nothing else, is going to bring that route running and just that teaching to those 2 players and say, hey, boys, let's get you better at this. Because, even if he is only here maybe one more season after 2024, or maybe not at all, right? We don't know what Keenan Allen's future looks like beyond 2024. He's going to bring that knowledge aspect to it as well, where you can let him be that number 3 receiver this year. He doesn't need to come in on heavy personnel. He doesn't need to come in on first down. That's fine. Because when he's out there on the field, more likely than not, it's going to be situations where that route running is going to be the separator and the big difference in why he's on the field. So again, it's so cool to look up and down this receiver depth chart and see 3 different types of receivers that are all really good at doing different things, and having that at the disposal for your new, shiny toy that is your number 1 overall quarterback, in Caleb Williams.
Well, and I think to your point with just bringing the skill set into the room and what he can teach these guys, I think it can kind of get an eye roll sometimes of like,
sure,
yeah, I'm sure you're going to teach him a lot, but like, there's also the aspect of, has DJ Moore ever been the second best route runner on his team?
No.
Right. So
not a damn chance.
These guys are going to be competing in practice over it, right? And that's going to drive DJ Moore to get better. That's going to drive Rome Odunze to get better, because they want to match that old man. They want to beat him at his game,
Well, like, and DJ Moore said that, right? Kay Adams made a trip up to Hallis Hall. There's a great article over at OnTapSportsNet.com about it. He's like, it's going to be a race to 1,000 yards with the 3 of us. He's like, it's going to be internal competition. And hey, iron sharpens iron, man. And there's no better way to get the best out of that receiving room than having 3 alphas competing for touches and competing for yards.
Yeah. So I think it is really exciting to look at the weapons that the Bears have coming into this year. I mean, it's probably the best I've seen it ever, if I'm being frank. I mean, maybe
in my lifetime,
Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall and Martellus Bennett and Matt Forte has it edged.
But they didn't have the depth that this team does. I think that's the big separator.
And once you throw in the locker room aspect of, like, there were always some questions with Alshon. I think he was a good guy, but like there was always some stuff in the media about his commitment level, which like I said, I never fully bought into it, but it was out there. There was smoke. And then with Marshall, there was always something. Whatever you want, whatever it might be. And then with Marty,
Bennett,
you had
trying to beat the shit out of Kyle Fuller.
Yeah. So there was always that. Once you factored that locker room aspect in, I think that this room is clearly better as far as running backs or just weapons in general go. Pure talent, that one might have had the edge, but there's other considerations that I think do make this 2024 weapons group the strongest I've ever seen for the Bears.
Well said, my friend. I completely agree. It's something that we truly, in my lifetime and certainly in yours, like that aforementioned group is the closest thing that we've seen to this.
All right, folks. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for joining me and Ron here on the show. And we will be back in 1 week's time to talk about tight ends and offensive line. And that's going to be a fun one. I'm really excited to talk some O-line. But make sure to go over to ontapsportsnet.com. We have articles over there about the Bears Daily. If you like the content here, this is the type of stuff we're trying to write about over there. So make sure to go check it out. If you're interested in other Chicago sports, we've got Blackhawks, we've got Bulls, we've got Cubs, White Sox, we got the Fire, we have a gambling show, we have a college football show, we have golf going on, we have everything over at ontapsportsnet.com. We got podcasts about it all, so make sure to go check us out. It's all up on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you can find this stuff, we're there. And thank you guys for listening, and have a great night. Ron, why don't we get out of here with a good old bear down?
Bear down, baby.
Bear down.